Good afternoon, everyone. We are here, and you are here too. Let us all come together as one in this moment now, releasing all thought, all ideas, all of anything of distraction. Just be here now, where you truly are. Well, you know what we mean, because truly you are not here. But be in the now, which is the only time that is. Breathe and release. Relax. Be present now. All is well. And we are here, and you are as well. So, this afternoon, we are so pleased to come in, as always, to join with you, to communicate with you in this way, to aid in any way that we can in your life, in your awakening. We wanted to talk about judgment today and what it is you are to release. Of course, you're going to be releasing the whole of all of judgment. That is all of perception, you see. So, perception follows judgment. How did you come to be here? It was a decision on your part. You wanted to see what it would be like to come and to learn in this way. This experience that you are going through, or you're seeming to experience, is but an illusion, of course. It is also your classroom, your way to wake up from the dream is to let it all go. Release all judgment completely. How do you do that? Well, we want you to learn to choose who you listen to. Will it be the voice for God, which is the Holy Spirit, or the voice of the ego? You can always tell who you are listening to by the way that it feels and the thoughts that are coming to you. So, any thoughts of condemnation, of judgment of any sort, and what we mean by judgment and condemnation of any sort, we mean anything that projects out. You're listening to a voice that is not of God. It's important to remember you want to listen to the voice for love, which is always forgiveness, which is always clarity, which is always truth. Here and now, you can do this. You can absolutely let go of all thoughts of condemnation. You can choose again. You do not have to listen to the voice of condemnation. You do not have to follow in that way. You can always choose again. In fact, it is your responsibility to choose again, because we cannot come in and choose again for you. It has to be you who can choose. And what we want to say is because your mind is the decision maker, you see. So it's always up to you what voice you listen to. To wake up from illusion, you must let go of listening to the thought of condemnation. So the voice for condemnation, and instead listen to the voice for God, which is forgiveness. So we are here, and we are eager to help you with anything along your journey. We are aware that there are many questions, and so we are ready for these questions.
First question. My daughter was mentally ill, and I prayed and prayed. She just kept getting worse and eventually committed suicide. I'm not hurt because she was not healed. I am hurt because after years and years of prayer, I never heard a response. I suspect that it might be answered, I'm always there, I always speak to you, but I cannot hear. I know that some others hear easily, but over many years of praying, nothing has ever changed and it hurts. If I had a younger brother calling out to me, I would make sure that he heard. Can you help me see this correctly?
Absolutely. First of all, we will tackle this from a different direction and make you aware of what is happening. There is a block to the experience of reconnecting with your daughter in the way that she is now. Your memory of her is a form, of course. And as you were saying, she was mentally ill and then committed suicide. So there is judgment there, you see. And it is not a condemnation to call someone mentally ill, but it is something that is being held on to. And remember that the form and that mentality is not your daughter, was not the spirit that she is, you see. And so the mind has made up its own interpretation of what it will sound like for her to connect with you again. And the thing to let go of is any ideas of how she used to be in your life and in your experience. Because sometimes notes, we'll just call them notes, from the other side will come through in different ways. It will not necessarily be a physical voice heard by your physical ears, or even a voice heard in your mind. Sometimes it can be things that symbolize the individual as they were an individual in the illusion, you see. And so you miss the miracle when you believe the mind, when it tells you the only way to hear her is to hear her voice. Does this make sense? So you want to be open to all the ways in which she is communicating with you, because she is communicating with you. Think instead of different things that can symbolize her presence and be open to them. But don't think that you may necessarily know, but you will feel it. So, and often it comes in a form of feeling as well, instead of a dead on physical representation of form that you remember. Because remember, her form is not her. And sometimes, well, we'll tell you when the mind makes itself up, it's difficult to get beyond a belief. But you can easily get beyond the belief by looking at that belief and realizing that it is not true. And to do that is to ask the Holy Spirit to look at it with you. Does this make sense? So that you can see it without judgment, without your own experience of her painting over her natural energy, you see, or her natural presence. So,
As a follow up, what happens to someone who commits suicide? Does it vary according to whether they were mentally or physically ill?
it's a good question, only because we wanted to say to you there is no difference. And we even wanted to take it this far and want everyone to realize this. All transition from this plane of existence is suicide. All of it. Whether you think that you are acting out a suicide or the body just seems to go, say cancer, for example, that is suicide. Are you sinful for this? No. All it is an exit, you see. Now, are there, well, we would like to say that you're here to learn. And if you have not learned, most likely you will return. Does this make sense? Is that a punishment? No. It is a decision of mind. All is a decision of mind. When you transition is a decision of the mind, you see. And yes, if you are listening to the Holy Spirit all along the way, you will know when, from your higher mind, it is decided that you leave. Does this make sense? So we appreciate this conversation. We appreciate this question because it opens up more for you to understand that there is no sin, that no one is at fault, no one is guilty. Everyone is innocent. Suicide? You're innocent, you see. You can't stay here forever. What a blessing. But yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're going to ask if this individual is in here. Does this answer your question? You can type your answers into the chat box. Wonderful. Perfect. Yes, there is a question from the chat room.
There is the notion of soulmates. Yet, if there is only one omnipresencing, undivided, pure goodness flowing God self, I don't see who could there be to be whose mate. In heavenly reality, is it just God loving itself infinitely now?
Well, in the grand scheme of things, yes, but you didn't separate in the grand scheme of things. So a soulmate never leaves its mate because there is no separation in truth. But when you come into this plane of existence that is not really here, where you take on different forms and act as though you are not one, there comes about certain situations that may arise in which two come together in such a way that forgiveness is the only purpose, you see. And there is an awareness of this, you see. And there is also a recognition of home. Not because the other is different from you, but because you remember yourself in the other. Does this make sense? Now, does that mean there are soulmates? Here, there are things, or there seem to be things, which we have talked about before as special relationships. And that is of the ego. A special relationship says, this is mine, you see. It is for my use in such a way. When in reality, when you allow all others to be themselves and you come together in an allowing nature, then it becomes, and indeed, when you hand this relationship to the Holy Spirit to guide for your awakening, it becomes a holy relationship. So those are the relationships you want to pay attention to in that way. It's who am I listening to? Am I listening to the voice for God or the voice for the ego? The ego who speaks of possession, you see. Possessing another and being joined with another in such a way that is so restricting that if you do this, it will upset me, but if you do that, it will make me glad. You can see this. That's listening to the ego voice, you see. Because your happiness does not depend on another. Your happiness does not depend on how another responds to you or anyone. Your happiness depends on the happiness that is natural within you and your attention to it above all else, you see. And that happiness is peace, is unconditional love, is unconditional joy, and is natural. Does this answer your question?
Yes. So the holy relationship is when no lack is found within?
Absolutely, because instead of seeing lack together and finding oneness out of lack and coming together, the two are already whole. And when you are whole and come together, you only make more whole, you see. Does this make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Another question for me. It has appeared to be that cannabis use is, for my spiritual practice, what I imagine Adderall is to students engaged in academic pursuits. I found that it helps me to be more receptive to the words you speak and the words I read in Course in Miracles. With it, I often feel it's easier to lighten up, to go with the flow, be more hopeful, less judgmental. Without it, I can be a really angry a-hole. Though the evidence appears to point one way, am I ultimately just fooling myself? Is it better to refrain from incorporating any kind of mind-altering sacrament into my spiritual practice life?
Okay, let's talk about this. So you were correct about everything you said. Yes, you're fooling yourself. Does that make you guilty? No. But your mind is made up about something, and right now its hold is strong. And so, of course, we would not tear that from you. But if you want to release yourself from magic, you would like to hand it over and ask for you to be guided in such a way toward whatever will bring you into greater wholeness. Does this make sense? Because in fact, you can look actually at the agitation you experience when you seem to not be taking or smoking or whatever it is, cannabis, and you look at it with the Holy Spirit and ask to be shown it in such a way that instead of judging it, even the anger, judgment upon anger, you actually look at it without judgment. You just say to yourself, this anger, I must have decided to think unloving thoughts. Unlovingly, you see. Does that make you guilty? No, but you can forgive it. Forgive yourself for the experience of turning to anger rather than love, you see. And to loosen the hold that the illusion has on you, you gently, step by step, and it is a gentle step by step. It's not a rush into it and take that away from you. We wouldn't say that that would help necessarily. But instead, to gently release yourself from the need or the feeling of the need to use anything outside of you, you see. And remember this makes it easier. There's nothing that is outside of you. This is your dream. You are the dreamer of your dream. You are not a victim of the dream. It is all your mind. So, to wake up, you recognize that you are the dreamer of the dream. And then you decide how you want to go to wake up. And you are on the path to wake up. So follow guidance from within, from the Holy Spirit, who looks with you at all of your life experience without judgment, without condemnation, you see. That's a huge one, to look without condemnation, to see yourself as innocent, you see. We thank you for this question.
I have an online question. Sometimes it feels that the daily ACIM lessons and mind training we do have gone out the window. I'm in a new job and I think I'm very capable and have been in a similar position, but I'm afraid of hostile work environment as I had bad experiences in the past. How can I get out of the primitive mind anxiety and get back to the Holy Spirit thought system?
Brilliant question. Let's see. Well, it's good that you recognize that there is fear that is active with this seemingly new situation. So you are aware of where you seem to lose awareness. Does this make sense? So in that awareness that you might lose awareness, be aware. Does this make sense? We told the channel the other day that we are always with her. We are always with all of you, as you know. But we said to her something a little different. When you lose awareness of me, remember me. Does this make sense to you?
Yes.
Wonderful. And as far as the fear goes, it was fear that was mentioned, right? Okay. Remember, what is fear? What is fear but judgment? So anytime that judgment enters into your mind, know that fear is there, and vice versa. So notice that you are listening to another voice rather than the Holy Spirit, the voice for God, and know that you can relinquish this in the awareness of it, you see. So you are noticing a block to the awareness of love, which is important, because without awareness of the block, you would not see love in truth. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. So the suggestion is to remember that you have an awareness where you lose awareness. And instead of continuing with loss of awareness, forgive yourself. Forgive the loss of awareness. Does this make sense? And here's the thing. Without forgiveness, fear is easily experienced. Not because there's anything fearful about not extending forgiveness, but because forgiveness is your protection, you see. Forgiveness comes from your right mind, whereas the other is a mind that can wander. And when a mind goes wandering, it can take you right into fear, which would be right into judgment. So.
Question. I'd like, please, you to explain the full and whole thought system that supports the following choice. When we feel anything that seems to be the opposite of love, instead of reacting with resistance and punishment, we're to give acceptance and compassion. Thank you.
Let's see if we can get this right. Are you asking which mind you're thinking from when you choose to think in the opposite of love? Or are you asking when you choose to think with love?
If the author of this question could answer the question, just type in. I am asking the thought behind when I'm asking the thought behind when I choose to think with love about myself.
With love about yourself, you are choosing to think with the Holy Spirit, which is the voice for God, which is the voice for gentleness, which is voice that does not judge, you see. There is no judgment, only forgiveness. And it is that simple. Thank you.
Can you give me an example of the thought the Holy Spirit would tell me?
Do you have a particular example of a situation that we can draw from? Let's see.
Just a lot of huge fear and resistance going on all the time.
Well, Holy Spirit will show you that it is not there, that the resistance is not true or real, and to just let it go, to look beyond it by actually looking at it. This does open us up to talk about this. So in order to get beyond what you are resisting, you must actually look at it directly with the Holy Spirit. You see, instead of turning a blind eye to it, instead of ignoring it, and instead of pretending that it is not there. As you all know, we have said many times, this plane of existence is illusion, that everything here is illusion and it is just a dream. Does that mean that when something upsetting comes up in your life that you seem to be experiencing, that it means for you to ignore it and cover it up? Not at all. In fact, what you want to do is ask the Holy Spirit to see it with you, to look at it with you, and to show you how to release it, to show you that it is not really there. You want the Holy Spirit to walk you through your experience here so that none of these situations that seem to arise will be ignored. Does this make sense? Because in ignoring it, you are just covering up a gaping wound that will not be healed unless you bring it to the light. And when you choose to ignore it, you choose to run away from it, you just cover it right back up. So then it begins to be lost to your awareness once again. And you must be aware of your blocks to love in order to have them taken away. Because we want to explain to you the Holy Spirit is not going to come in and take it away from you, but it wants to look at it with you so that together you can see it and it can be shown to you what it really is so that it can just be let go of. Does this make sense?
To project on other bodies or on mine is exactly the same thing, right?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And in fact, we were going to talk about projection today anyway. So we might as well talk about it now. See, the ego wants to project outside of you so that you do not actually see what's going on. It wants to say that the fear or the pain that you seem to experience does not come from in you, but comes from outside of you. So you project it out to try to get rid of it. And that is the strange thought system of the ego. It says, I want to get rid of this, and so I will throw it out there where it cannot be seen, and in fact will not be available to be healed. So that's all of the victim mentality and the blame and so on. So that's what you want to look at with the Holy Spirit, all of this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome and thank you.
I have an online question.
Yes.
What is ultimate surrender to the will of God?
It is literally what we were just saying. Willingness to look with the Holy Spirit at your mistakes and not run from it. Does this make sense? Ultimate surrender is letting go of all the thoughts you hold about yourself, about your brothers and your sisters, about the world, about anything, you see. And little by little, it is corrected as you make it available for the Holy Spirit to use to help bring you home, you see. That is surrender. Surrender means to let go of believing that anything here is more important than God itself, you see. And that's not because God is selfish or thinks that it needs to have you do that, but it is that you are at home when you release yourself from the idea that you can be anywhere else. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. Does this answer your question?
Thank
Also,
you.
surrender is allowance, you see, allowing of life. And we talked about something like this recently, about being, compliant with life, with the flow of life, you see, rather than resisting the flow of life. Does this make sense? So let's say you are asked to clean up something around the house. Let's say dishes were left out, and someone asks you, well, look, it would be nicer if you would please take care of your dishes. Resistance would say, oh, hell no. I have something else to do. This is irritating, you see. Whereas being compliant is, okay, I'm going to go with the flow. I will just move forward and do what goes with the flow, rather than resist or push up against. Does this make sense? That is really surrender as well. Just being open to being guided rather than resistant. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I have another online question. Are our thoughts of both love and judgment felt by those that have left this world?
Not at all. In fact, once you truly depart from this world, you don't feel anything. There is only love, and it is all you know. You don't know of anything else. Does this make sense?
Ready for an answer? Yes.
Wonderful.
This person says, hello, mighty companions, and asks, was your Course in Miracles, introduced at a given time because people now, as opposed to several centuries ago, were more willing or accepting to the ideas?
Yes,
Namely, that this world is an illusion?
absolutely all of the above. All of the above, and the consciousness has evolved to a certain point that it can be reached, which in the past, it was not reachable in this way, you see. So we used many different ways of reaching those around at the time. So everything is always done that would suit the current mentality, so to speak, for lack of a better way to explain that. Does this make sense? So the awareness, that would be better to say. The awareness at the time. Because if we told them what we told you in the Course, they would not understand. You see, but things have seemingly evolved since then in awareness and in consciousness. So there's more of an opening to truth in this way than there was then. Does this make sense? It's difficult to explain because time does not exist. But yes, the awareness then was different, so to speak. So,
If I could follow up, I hope
Yes,
this person
please.
doesn't mind. Was it that, I mean, there under some understanding differences, but
yes.
yet they, in some ways, they were more aware of spirit than.
Yes. Whereas along the way, you had many thinkers, we'll call them, who have opened up minds a little more for more depth of awareness of self, you see. So we'll just use some famous ones, or a famous one. For example, Freud. So he was not available back then. And what he discovered of consciousness or of the mind was not present at the time. Whereas we use a lot of that thinking in order to convey the message now, you see. So those pieces of information were not in place then. And because it was not in place then, those who were in the experience at that time didn't have access to that kind of thinking. So, does this help?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Yes.
Is seeing the world as ego-based a form of condemning? Is it wrong to see the divine in the beauty of the world and as the source of life?
First of all, say the first part again.
Is seeing the world as ego-based a form of condemning?
We'll answer that question. You are judging it. So here's the thing. Ego is all over the place in this seeming reality. You can't miss it. Not really. Does it mean that you are to condemn the thought? No. Does it mean you are to embrace the thought? No. What you are to see is that it is not real. You see, that it is not love, but it can be forgiven. Not that you have to forgive an ego, but you forgive your mind for thinking an ego is anything. Does this make sense? So to condemn is thinking with the ego. To love is thinking with the Holy Spirit. So what you were saying is it good to see the divine? Is it good to see beauty in the world? It's not that it is good or bad, but you're thinking with spirit when you are appreciating and experiencing beauty, as you were saying, which is just unconditional. And when we say unconditional means that it's not because something is like this. Does this make sense? Do you follow where we are going?
Yes.
Wonderful. Because, yes, this world is filled with ego. Are you to condemn the world? No. You are to forgive the world. That's what the world is asking for. And remember, the world is your mind. Your mind and the world is one. Does this make sense? But the thing, it is not oneness. Do you see the difference? Meaning the world is not outside of your mind because it is in your mind, but it is not oneness. It is multitudinous, so to speak, because it has forms, many seemingly different and separate things, when in reality, it is one. Does this make sense? But also, we don't want you to confuse what we are saying with saying that then the world is oneness, because the ego is not oneness. You see? So we don't want to confuse anyone with that. We just want you to see it in that way, to understand that it is all in your mind. So in your own mind, it is easier for it to be healed and corrected rather than thinking that there are a multitude of different forms and different personalities and all of that that have to be included in the correction in order for your mind to be healed. Does this make sense? What you have to do is look at it all with the Holy Spirit, which means without condemnation, without judgment, and allow the Holy Spirit to show you the truth of you. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question. In Course in Miracles, chapter 28, it says the world was over long ago. Can you explain this?
It was over the instant you thought that it was. That's the answer.
Thank you.
Is there something more that?
Yes. Follow-on was, can you please describe the process of forgiving the mind?
You look at your mind with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit shows you what forgiveness is. So that means to look on your mind without judgment, without condemnation, without pointing fingers and saying guilty. Does this make sense? But instead, to be open to the truth of you, which is innocence. You are innocent. Does this answer your question? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the difference between the proper use of denial against the ego thought system and just simple resistance? How can we truly allow and feel the feelings in the present moment and still use the proper use of denial?
So let's go back to the beginning of that question. Please say it again.
What is the difference between the proper use of denial against the ego thoughts?
Okay, so instead of thinking of it as against the ego thoughts, you ask to see it with the Holy Spirit, which is to look beyond it. Does this make sense? And that is forgiveness. Does this make sense?
Yes. Yes.
And then the next part.
How can we truly allow, feel the feelings in the present moment and still use proper use of denial? So many, just to try and clarify that, I know so many teachers teach denying.
How so?
So that you don't affirm it.
Right. So there can be a little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes with that kind of denial of saying you don't affirm it. You see, you don't affirm it. So the right use of denial is to overlook it. Does this make sense? So you look at it with the Holy Spirit, you look beyond it to the truth. And you don't affirm what seems to be the problem. Does this make sense? And so you look past it instead. So.
But should I experience the experience? What about, should I experience the bad feelings?
Well, if the bad feelings arise, you don't want to push them away, because to push them away says that they are real in some way, but it doesn't mean cultivate them. Does this make sense? So the right use of denial there would be to say something like, we'll just use this for example, can all love, can love that is unconditional and all-encompassing also be hate? Does this make sense? So let's say you're looking for love to experience love, but you're also experiencing some form of hate. So you ask yourself, can love really also be hate? The obvious answer is no. That is denial. Does this make sense? So what it is canceling itself out. Do you follow what we're saying?
Yes. Thank you.
Or can something that is all also be not? Wonderful. Yes.
Do we create thoughts in the physical form, or do we just tune up to thoughts based on our frequency, and the law of attraction brings more similar thoughts to us?
Let's see. Ask the first part of the question again, please.
Do we create thoughts in the physical form, or do we just tune
Thoughts.
into thoughts?
Thoughts are just thoughts. There are a multitude of thoughts that are floating around. You see, so your mind will gravitate toward whatever is available and whatever you are currently, like you were saying, vibrating. Does this make sense? But when you set your mind straight, meaning decide in the morning how you want to feel, what you would like to experience, then you draw to yourself the thoughts of that nature rather than random things floating around. Does this make sense?
Waiting for a response. Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Even though I'm practicing truth with the Holy Spirit and I'm seeing the body isn't real and it's meaningless, I know that I have to take care of things of this world like paying bills and honoring contracts. But do I love the body? Do I take special care of it with healthy food, deep breathing, taking it to doctor's appointments?
You don't want to see it as a special thing. Does this make sense? But you are going to feel like you would like to feel okay in it. Does this make sense? So of course you're not going to say, well, this body is not real anyway, so I'll just cut it up and do things that are unnatural, so to speak. Does this make sense? Or condemning would be a better way to say that. Does this make sense to you?
So what we think of as loving the body is really loving ourselves because
Yes,
we
is
want
to actually love the mind, because the body is only experienced in the mind. So when you are condemning anything in your mind, then you are condemning, you see. You're in a state of the ego, condemnation. So what you want to do is to be loving to yourself. Be loving to all that you experience. Does this make sense? Meaning you don't deny the body because you believe that you're in it. Does this make sense? So we would say, do avoid trying to pretend like it's not there, because that is a mistake that is often made in spirituality. That instead of accepting that, okay, I'm in this dream, the body is not real, I'd still like to feel good in it. I'd still like to feel vital in some way, knowing even still that it's an illusion and it's ephemeral. But it would still only be logical for it to feel okay, because in that way you can then from that point extend more love. Does this make sense? Rather than trying to escape the body, and that is a mistake. To try to continually escape the body will continue to be in your awareness like no other. So you don't want to push up against the body. In fact, we talked about this in the course, that to deny it is one of the most cruel ways in dealing with it. Does this make sense? Meaning, you don't want to pretend like you're not thirsty if you're very thirsty, you see, and deny yourself water if you're very thirsty and you're trying to escape the body. Because in doing so, you're saying this is real. This is real. It is something that's a problem. It is an issue. And so in my mind, I've made it real. And so you experience the consequences of that. Does this make sense? So in order to have a real awakening, you want to avoid pushing it away, but allow it to naturally happen with awakening, which simply is the releasing of it, which is peace. Does this make sense? So, thank you.
So in the dream, 1 second outside of the dream may appear to be eons within the dream. Would you be able to help clarify and dispel the unreality of time as the dreaming mind perceives it?
Only you can do that. We cannot do that for you. But just stop believing that time is real. That it's not, you understand what we're saying? That stop analyzing it. Just accept it. It's not real. Time does not really exist. But while you are here in this plane of existence, you do experience it. Does this make sense? So as you go along in this experience, in order to live, and we're going to say, quote, live, because it's not really living, in this experience, there are some things you have to take care of. We know that. We know that. So take care of them. There are appointments. Don't look at the appointments and become upset that it deals with time. You see, that's all part of the dream. And it's your dream. How do you want it to go? But of course, remind the mind, time is not real, but don't fight it. Does this make sense? Do you follow what we're saying?
Yes.
You think too much. You need to just accept and let go. Be guided.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can be more free when you are simply guided rather than analyzing. Remember what we've said. The ego analyzes, spirit accepts. So just go with the flow. Just go with the flow. Don't push up against it. It never feels good to push against it. Just flow. All is well. Thank you.
How do I hand over a fear that I've felt for maybe more than 10 years? How do I hand that over to the Holy Spirit when it feels so strong? I feel totally trapped and blind.
Look at it. Be open and willing to look at it without judging it. Because in fact, the fear that you're experiencing has to do with judgment. Does this make sense? If you can look with the Holy Spirit, which is handing it to the Holy Spirit, to actually look at it and see that there really is nothing there, there's nothing to judge, then you will be released from the fear. And we're not saying that it's going to evaporate in a second, because as you've said, it's been an ongoing thing in your experience for some time. And so it has a momentum. So you have to be very allowing of the momentum to subside. And the way to do that is to stop judging it. You see, when it comes up, tell yourself, you must have thought differently than love. But is that a problem? not in this way. Just accept it and forgive it. Does this make sense? Don't condemn yourself for it.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Does the body need love as it needs food?
Well, does your mind need love?
Yes.
So there you go. That's your answer. To love it is to think only loving thoughts. So instead of seeing it as a separate entity, just extend loving thoughts. Just extend loving thoughts. You don't have to think about it separately to extend loving thoughts. Does this make sense?
Yes, so the body is part of the mind.
Yes, it is.
Being a dream?
Yes. In fact, you're okay. We want you to laugh. In fact, we want everybody to laugh, because to laugh is to make light. Okay? Everything here is a dream. Everything is in your mind. Nothing is not in your mind, you see. And so that question is yes. Yes, the body is in your mind. The body only is experienced in your mind, you see. So if you didn't have the mind, there would be no body either. Does this make sense? But you do have a mind, and your mind is here to be used for love, choosing love, deciding to move in the direction of your source, which is love, always. Forgiveness, always, you see. You have a mind. The body is in the mind. The dream is in the mind. The world is in the mind. You are in the mind.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes.
The way of mastery says, until we embody only the reality of love and walk the earth wholly as the thought of love in form, then you will never leave this plane. Is that true?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. The mind can make a different decision and go to another plane. Does this make sense?
Does that mean only to have thoughts of love always?
Well, yes. But to forgive anything that isn't. That's what you're here to do. Forgive. And as you know, this is a classroom. And so your life is your curriculum. Does this make sense?
Bingo.
Wonderful. Now, the thing we are going to say is that the mind will make up when it decides that you will not come back here. So, but there is no special thing you have to accomplish to not come back. You see?
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
You say that we're all one, separation is illusion, and I've read that God has but one son, but you keep saying we, indicating more than one. What or who is the we to which you refer? Is it the totality of the sonship?
Yes, it is the totality of the sonship. So when we have decided to come in and speak as we, it is to be inclusive rather than exclusive. So I can, of course, come in and talk to you as myself, but I wanted to come in and talk to you in such a way that is more inclusive, which means also you, because we are one. Does this make sense? Does this answer your question?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Does night dreaming lucidity precede lucidity in all states, including the so-called awake daydreaming state?
No.
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 Because to me it feels like a natural progression.
That's for your experience, you see. But you do not have to have lucid night dreams in order to waken from this dream. Just remember, though, that your night dreams are not different from this dream. Okay, all dreams are dream. Just enjoy the lucid night dreams. Does this make sense?
Yes, dreaming is dreaming.
Yes, it is.
They're super fun.
Enjoy it. But also you can apply it here in your seemingly waking dream, where you can begin to have fun here too. Not to hold on to being here or seeming to be here, but stop taking it so seriously and be more light about it. Does this make sense? Wonderful. Yay.
So I know what we resist persists. And my question is, when I am focusing on a better feeling, am I not actively resisting the bad feeling?
Yes, if you're focusing on feeling, okay, here's a way to put it. If you're focusing on cultivating feelings of feeling good, meaning noticing that feeling good and you've made a decision to feel good, and you're just going with the flow of feeling good, you're resisting nothing. There's nothing, no resistance there at all. It's only when something comes up in your mind that takes you away from feeling good that resistance is introduced. And what you want to do in those situations is, once again, look at that resistance with the Holy Spirit to see what's really going on. So,
Thank you.
thank you. So, well, it looks like it is time. So, we enjoyed this interaction beyond words. We are pleased to be with you all the time. And in fact, we are with you all the time. You are never alone. We are always with you. You are blessed always. Love thyself. Be thyself by choosing to be shown your blocks to love and to look on it with the Holy Spirit rather than with the mind of condemnation. You really want to let go of the idea of condemnation. You want to go and gravitate toward forgiveness by letting the Holy Spirit show you the truth of you. You are blessed always, and we are always with you. We love you, and we thank you as always. You are blessed. Namaste.